Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. My name is Trainer Chip Ritchie, and I'm joined here, as always, by my fellow co-host Azul GG. What's going on, Azul? How we doing, man?
Yo, what's going on, Chip? Doing good. Been super busy the last week or so. Trying to catch up with streams, but had a ton of coaching. A lot of people trying to get ready for Indiana Regional, so I've been really busy with the coaching. If you're interested in my coaching, I do coach. Check me out over at medify.com/AzulGG, I think. But it's been good overall. Been trying to test for Indiana. I really haven't done a ton of testing, I would say. But I think that's also kind of like I didn't expect to get a whole ton of testing done. I've kind of narrowed down my picks for what I think I would play, but we'll talk more about that later. And then just been doing the good old content grind. What about you? How was the rest of your Euro trip?
It was awesome, man. Yeah, it was a great time. So yeah, I just got back yesterday from the Europe trip. Obviously, last week we recorded. It was a little more scuffed than I realized it was going to be. I didn't quite realize how bad my audio sounded when we tested it before I left, but it was not the best. So we apologize for that. But thanks for hanging out and still listening to last week's episode. And also, yeah, I saw what you did there, Azul, with the face cam on the last episode. Azul did not tell me he was going to be doing that, for anyone wondering. So that was a fun little surprise when I opened up the video after it went live and was seeing how things sounded and looked. But yeah, it was a good time. My wife and I went to London and to Paris, in addition to Frankfurt as well for the international championships, obviously. So yeah, we just did some fun touristy things. We really had a great time in both cities. London was awesome. It's just really cool to me in all of these places, really, but mostly like it was really evident in Paris, just like how this modern city is built around all this super old architecture, which is always really cool to me because like here where I live in Raleigh, it's like just, big square buildings downtown,
Yeah.
and then like the suburbs, right? Whereas in Paris, we were in the city and it's just like, these buildings that were built before our country even was founded is like what their city is built around. It's like you look down a side street and it literally looks like a movie set, and that's just like the everyday life. It's pretty wild. So I always
Yeah.
love stuff like that. Love traveling and seeing new places and just experiencing what other people's day to day lives are like. It was definitely really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really I love London from the times I've been there. Never been to Paris, but I would love to go there as well. And it reminds me, like, I'm also from Boston, and there's like old buildings and kind of stuff like that as well. So it reminds me a little bit of Boston when I went to London. But yeah, London's super cool, and hopefully get the chance to go to other places like Paris and stuff. But got a lot of Pokemon stuff to talk about today.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna be covering Indy and I don't know how to is it Joinville. That's the way it,
Joinville.
it
Yeah, I believe
reads.
it's Joinville.
Joinville regionals coming up. There's not only the North American Indiana regionals, but there's also the Joinville regionals in Latin America. I'm not sure where it is.
It's in Brazil.
It's in Brazil. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about that, and there's also the Bilbao special event. I didn't know about that either. Happened. Well, I knew about the Latin American regionals. We talked about that last week. I didn't know
Right.
about Bilbao happening. I didn't know it was this weekend.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
So
a huge weekend for Pokemon with the two regionals and the special event happening in Spain. Pretty
yeah,
wild.
literally pretty much everyone except for Australia is going to be playing, unless any of the Australian players are making their way over to Bilbao or Joinville. I don't know about any of them coming to Indiana, but I don't think there is. So yeah, only the Australian players have to sit out another week or two, I think, until they have their next regional. And then we got some new cards leaked from that Pokemon Go set. I think people are overhyping one of the cards. The rest of them kind of look bad, but we'll see.
We'll
I
talk
guess
about
the
it. We'll talk about it.
Mewtwo looks like it might be okay. And of course, always going to be guessing the flavor text every single episode. This time I'm picking a flavor text for Chip to guess. And I picked one that I think there's a solid chance Chip could get it.
Let's
I went
go.
with one that sounded a little tricky, but I was like, there's a solid chance that Chip could get this one here. So I think it'll be interesting. And then we did a little bit of another Twitter Q&A leading into this one as well. If you guys want to get in on those, we need you to respond to the tweet that we tweet out. So go follow us on Twitter, and we're going to tweet out a tweet sometimes being like, yo, if you want to ask us some questions on the podcast. We don't do this every podcast episode,
Hmm.
especially before the big events. We sometimes will tweet out and be like, yo, give us your questions for this upcoming podcast episode. So make sure you follow us on Twitter at Uncommon energy. Is there an underscore in there?
Uncommon underscore
Score.
energy.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, follow us over there so that way you can get your questions into the podcasts when we do look for questions.
Yeah, I was
And
so mad when I was making the Twitter for the podcast because I wanted it to just be at Uncommon Energy. And the person who has the username at Uncommon Energy literally made their account in like November of 2021. So, like, just a few months before we started the podcast. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, how does this happen? What is the chance of that? But
do they
yeah,
use your Twitter?
Uncommon underscore energy over on Twitter to join in on the Q&As. I think the Q&As are a great way for us to interact with listeners because, we really get to just respond to the exact things you are thinking. And a lot of the questions are things that we would naturally talk about anyway. Like, for example, a big one this week was, should I be playing Manaphy in my deck? Should I be playing Manaphy? So we were obviously going to talk about that regardless. But then there's also a lot of questions that I think we wouldn't have necessarily talked about. So we'll get into some of those. We're not going to answer everything, obviously, because there was I think almost 40 questions total posted on the tweet. So not everything, but we'll answer a bunch of them and the big ones that really stuck out to us. So let's go ahead and hop into it, starting by looking at the Indianapolis, Joinville, and Bilbao tournament metas for this weekend. So Indy regionals, Joinville regionals, and then the Bilbao special event. So 3 different tournaments, 3 different regions. And I guess the first thing we should establish is, will the meta really be that different between these 3 tournaments? Or are we at a point where the game is there's so much information online that regional metas aren't necessarily as big of a thing as they used to be? Because I definitely feel like that was a big factor in the past, was how metas shifted between different regions. But now, are we just at a point where all the information is out there, so the metas are going to be really, really similar?
I don't know. That's a good question. Is for the span of the 4 weeks in a row we had of regionals, was that regional meta differences, or was that just the meta developing throughout the development of the meta? And it's hard to tell sometimes because I don't even know if we got the numbers for EUIC yet from Shemansky on the
Not yet.
breakdown, or RK9, but I don't know what I'm sure Mew is the most played deck, and then Arceus it's kind of weird because Arceus, if you put them all together, probably would be the most played deck, right? If you put all the Arceus variants together, but you don't do that because they're so different. Especially when you look at stuff like Arceus Duraludon, that plays so vastly different than other Arceus variants. But yeah, I don't know. Is it just the evolution of the meta more so than anything? It could be a little bit of, yeah, I don't know. Is there a real regional influence going on? And it doesn't feel really like it. I think one example was I forget who it was who got top 4 at the Australian tournament with the Inteleon Arceus Dark Box deck, and then in Salt Lake City the week after we saw that similar, but it was Liverpool the week, no, Salt Lake City
Yeah,
the
Salt
week
Lake City
after
was right after, yeah.
we saw the Nick Moffat and Ian Robb, and I think they were working on that list before Australia. I could be wrong on that. So it's we saw similar decks pop up in those regards. So was it a meta evolution? They take that deck and evolve onto it. I don't know. It feels weird. I don't think there really is. I think a lot of it is kind of, it was kind of the trends of what the top players decide to bring is gonna have the most, is gonna be the most successful decks. That's kind of it more than anything. I think we saw that a lot. A big impact of that at Salt Lake City specifically.
Definitely. Yeah, and I kind of agree with what you said of it feels more like it's just the meta naturally developing as opposed to a regional variants or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think that it really is just kind of going to evolve week to week to week. So I wouldn't be surprised if the results from these 3 big tournaments are really similar as far as meta share, and then also as far as what decks make up the day 2 or the top 32 field, and even potentially the top 8 field, or top 8 breakdown as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of similarities, but there's variance in Pokemon, right? And there's also variance in what decks people choose to bring. There's always a chance for some curveball like Sylveon VMAX to unsuspectingly make a run or something like that. So who knows? Really, anything can happen, and that's part of what makes Pokemon fun, right? So I'm excited to see what the meta will look like between the 3 regionals. But I think just for simplicity's sake through the rest of this tournament, or through the rest of this podcast, so we're not referring to all 3 tournaments every single time we talk about one. We're pretty much mostly going to be focusing on Indianapolis because that's where
Yeah.
Azul and I will both be. Azul's going to be going as a player. It was just announced today that I'm going to be there as a commentator, which I'm excited about. The regional streams are a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful that Pokemon keeps wanting to bring me out to them. So thanks to Pokemon for that. So yeah, we are both going to be there. So that is what the focus of our discussion today is going to be on. Will be Indianapolis, but because I think that the metas are going to be really similar at Bilbao and at Joinville, I think you can definitely take any advice or any, thoughts that we throw out there around Indianapolis and apply them directly to the other 2 tournaments pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
But go ahead.
I was trying to
I
leave
thought
a
you had
little
something
pause
else
for
to
you
say
to
off.
hop in and
Yeah.
take it away, but okay.
No, I thought you had something else you were going to say afterwards. Go for it.
We're ready to start breaking down some decks and talk about some of the most popular decks, the decks that we think will be the most popular. And I think the most talked about deck heading into this tournament weekend is without a doubt Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. And I think
Yeah.
it's just the fact that it was so dominant by such a small number of players in EUIC is really going to affect how people look at it moving into these tournament weekend this weekend, where you're going to have a lot of people who are really prepared for that matchup, who are testing that matchup a lot this week. And it's also probably going to increase in play a good bit because Rapid Strike Urshifu is a pretty easily accessible deck. It's a pretty cheap deck. People can build it for very low cost. There was a league battle deck around Rapid Strike Urshifu, which includes a 2/2 Urshifu line, which is all you need to play the deck at this point, the way that the current lists have been built. So while it wasn't a huge percentage of the EUIC meta, it absolutely dominated the tournament. I think we would both expect it to have a much larger meta share for this tournament weekend than it did leading into EUIC.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know how popular it'll still be. I probably put it on like Whimsicott's level of popularity, but maybe Whimsicott will be more popular. Whimsicott's been super popular in online tournaments recently. Like top, it's like top 4, top 5 most played, but it's like, the top 3 deck or 3 of the top 4 decks all have like 20. It's like very close to just being almost the most popular deck in the tournament. So in the online tournaments, Whimsicott's been super popular. Maybe Urshifu won't get quite that popular. Urshifu's been pretty popular in online tournaments as well, but its win rate has not been very good. But that's because the deck is so hard to play.
Yes.
In comparison to a lot of the other decks, and it doesn't have the safety net of Mew, where Mew is so powerful. It doesn't matter if you make like 10 mistakes with the deck throughout your game, you can still just win in the same way you would win as if you played perfectly. So it doesn't kind of have that safety net for it. So Urshifu is a lot, and I think actually we'll see a pretty bad win rate for Urshifu at what's it called, Indiana as well, because I think it's almost like underestimated how hard it is to play the deck, and I think a lot of people are playing it and they just don't quite have a grasp fully on how to play it, but they're just playing it because it is the deck right now. And I think that's going to hurt quite a few people from choosing to play it, to be honest. Like I really like the deck. I've been playing it a lot recently. Come up with my own kind of brew on it, where I've taken like a lot of the ideas from a lot of the top 8 lists and put them into my own list. And I really like it, but I'm not super confident with all the lines and stuff. And it's a pretty hard deck to play turn to turn. So yeah, I'm not super confident in that. I would want to bring it to the tournament, but it might end up being my choice because I do enjoy the deck a lot. And it's got outs to pretty much everything, to be honest. So it's definitely it might just be the best deck in the format, to be honest. Now that I've kind of put more time with it, I feel like it might just be the best deck in the format because there's just so much you can do with the deck so consistently.
Yeah, it's very good, but like you said, incredibly hard to play at the, highest level. And I think overall, like I think because of that, we could see a situation where a lot of top players don't choose to play the deck because it is like kind of this big thing. It's now on people's radar. It was under the radar for EUIC, which I think anytime a powerful deck like that is under the radar, it is a super good play for a big tournament, especially in the hands of great players, which is what we saw at EUIC. And so now that it's like kind of more on the radar, it becomes less of a good play. So maybe some of the top players will lean away from it. And I think if the top players that played it at EUIC, the people who come to mind, like Isaiah Bradner, Justin Bakari, Rahul Reddy, that whole crew of players who played it and made day two. I think if they choose to play this deck, I wouldn't be surprised to see one or two of them in top eight again. But
Yeah.
if, a top level players like them, or, whatever other testing group of top level players, if not a lot of people are playing it, if not a lot of top level people are playing it, I wouldn't be surprised to see it not in top eight at all, because it
Yeah.
is that hard to play correctly. And, with just a week's testing time, I don't have the confidence in just like the general player field to have spent the adequate amount of games needed in order to fully grasp all the different lines of play you have every single turn with that deck.
Yeah, I think that'll be the outcome. I think there will be quite a few top players piloting the deck.
Yeah.
I would actually be surprised if Justin and I know Isaiah will be there. I guess I don't know if Justin's going to Indiana. I think he is. I would be surprised if they didn't play it again. It definitely seems like a deck that Bradner is super confident in. I would be
Yeah.
surprised to see Bradner not playing it. I'm sure making some adjustments for expected changes in the meta and so on. But yeah, there was a huge difference in like all their lists. I think Gustavo brought the list with the best overall Mew matchup. Having that extra option of the Moltres V is a huge deal.
Hmm.
And then there's some some cards in there, and some of them that I wasn't a huge fan. Like the Eldegoss and Pedro's list seems a little sus. I never really tried it out, but I never saw Pedro set it up either. So I don't know if I like the look of the
Well,
Eldegoss.
I
But then
think
there's
that
stuff like the
Eldegoss like literally lost Pedro one of his games on stream. Just like the fact that it was an Eldegoss line as opposed to a second energy search. Like if I remember correctly, in one of his top 4 matches, there was a situation where if he had to use his first energy search early in the game, never
yeah
got to establish Eldegoss, and in the late game was 1 energy away from being able to pull off a play to come back and win that game, but didn't have access to it because the first energy search had gotten used and Eldegoss never got set up. So if there was just a second energy search in the deck, that
yeah
play maybe would have been there. And obviously, I'm sure Eldegoss got used throughout points of the tournament, and it
of
was
course
like,
yeah.
I'm sure that, Pedro got value from it, but is it more likely that you're going to be able to set up this stage 1 line, or just be able to use a second energy search?
Yeah, and especially with people like kind of knowing the weaknesses of the deck a little bit better. Like Marnie's just really, really good. Like how are
Yeah.
you got to find the little green guy, the big green guy. That means you're not getting Sobbles. That means you're
Yeah,
not getting
yeah.
Drizziles. You might
Well,
not
I think one of the
evolution for an
reasons they
Inteleon.
liked the like the Eldegoss line so much was because of Gossifleur, because
Yeah, all
Gossifleur is
Gossifleur is kind of cool.
effectively a fifth keep calling Pokemon, right?
Yeah,
But it can get you out anything, which I guess there's not really anything else you want to get out besides Rapid Strike Pokemon. But
Manaphy.
yeah, yeah, Manaphy nowadays, exactly. So, and yeah, that's another adjustment from uh the last tournament, is like I think that most of the Urshifu lists will probably have Manaphy in it for the mirror, especially because we saw how Tord just dominated the Rapid Strike Urshifu mirrors throughout the entire weekend because he had Manaphy
Yeah.
and no one else did. Tord definitely made the best meta call, I think, in that aspect. So yeah, there's really 4 different lists in cut, because there's 5 Urshifus. Justin and Isaiah were playing the same 60. We had Pedro's list, Tord's list, and Gustavo's, and they all had their differences. Gustavo with the Moltres also had some interesting tech cards that no one else had, like Crobat V, Piers, Energy Switch, and Energy Retrieval. All 4 cards that Gustavo played that no one else had in their list. And then, the other players, there was differences like Snorlax versus Mew from Celebrations. There's the Manaphies that I expect most people should be playing now. So where do you kind of land on Urshifu? You said you've been testing a list that's like a combination of the things you liked the best from everyone else's lists. Kind of what of these different tech options that you have, these like, 50 third through 60th slot cards, what are some of the ones you have really kind of landed on that you like the most?
So I haven't tried Artillery at all, and I think it probably just isn't a viable choice anymore because like the mirror match, I think everyone's gonna be playing Avery. So to put Artillery down and your Manaphy is gonna be tough. And also it's like not as hard to set up the Artillery because you do have to keep calling normally. So it's not too hard to set it up. So it's not too expensive to try and get online. But it just kind of feels like it's not necessary because you also just don't need to find your Rapid Strike energy that aggressively. Like we saw Justin and Isaiah, they didn't play a way to find Rapid Strike Energy besides
Right.
Raihan,
Right.
which everyone plays. And now that I played with the deck more, that feels fine. You don't really need an aggressive Gmax Rapid Flow. I think maybe the Piers is worth including to have the
Yeah.
option, but I don't think Artillery is necessary. I think Artillery is kind of wasted space. But when the turns you need the Rapid Strike Energy, you don't usually need to do too much else besides just get the Rapid Strike Energy and Gmax Rapid Flow, or you could just like find a different play that's just as good. So the
Yeah, and I think
Artillery,
that was one of the things that Gustavo made great use of the peers with is that,
yeah,
it's not a bench spot and it's a way to find your rapid strike energy. And it's also a way to draw you cards because it can get the Crobat V that he played. So I think like if you want to play peers, I would also try to find a way to put Crobat into the deck, to be honest.
yeah, that almost feels like it's like not necessary, but it almost kind of feels like it
It just
does. Like
goes
it can.
hand in hand. It like fits
Yeah,
too well together and it like almost feels necessary.
it's also really good at like setting up Moltres though. To be honest, just
Mhm.
get Moltres plus Dark Energy. It
Mhm.
almost kind of like feels like a second Sonya in that regard. Whereas like Sonya would get you your Moltres or get your Dark Energy. The Pierce is like a halfway point. You get your Dark Energy plus a
It's like
Moltres.
Roseanne's research, right?
Yeah, literally, it is like the Roseanne's research.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Metachamp, I haven't been playing Metachamp or Quick Shooting, and have not ever ran into like a situation where I'm sure I could have set up board states for Yoga Loop,
Sure.
but it just feels the double shady dealings in Teleon is just really good. Like you don't want to prize that thing. That thing literally is your deck. If you prize it, that's bad. Like so, I've kind of gone the Gustavo route of that. But I'm not playing the Amaltrace V. I'm not playing the Crobat. So I kind of went. I took like everything that each list chose not to play, I also don't play in my list. Like I don't play the Artillery, I don't play the Yoga Loop stuff, I don't play the Crobat Ultra Moltres V, I don't play the Crobat V. I play one Snorlax still, and then one Mew. And I
No,
did include the
no
Air Balloon.
Passimian anymore, I feel like, right? That was a card that I
No,
think Isaiah and Justin still had that the rest of the
yeah,
lists had cut.
yeah. So they could still Yoga Loop Genesects because of that, but
Right.
I don't even know if that's like a necessary option. It's never like for me, it's just never come up where it's like, oh, I need to be able to Yoga Loop. I'd rather just have like, the extra Moltres. And I've actually been like went a little bit higher on my energy count as well because just like finding dark energy sometimes can be kind of tough. And also, I've the water energy for the Aqua Bullet. I think is like your answer to Whimsicott. So like if you're looking for the tech for Whimsicott, I think it's just literally having access to Aqua Bullet.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and speaking of Whimsicott, that's the next deck that we need to talk about because it obviously, I think, even though Urshifu was the most popular deck in top 8, I feel like Whimsicott was definitely the surprise of the tournament because it made it to finals and it was like
Yeah.
a pretty much unknown deck. No one has ever succeeded at a major tournament with Whimsicott previous to this. So shout out once again to Frank Persick for coming up with a good solid list. And speaking of which, is there anything you should really change from Frank's list if you wanted to play Whimsicott? And also, where do we feel like it sits? I don't know that we could call it a tier 1 deck. It's definitely been really popular online. It definitely feels to me like it fits in that tier 2 category pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. But it's like also feels like it can kind of beat everything. And also there was a top 8 placement at Sao Paulo. Give them a
Oh
shout out as
yes,
well,
for
real
sure,
fast.
for
Yeah.
sure. Quite a different list though,
Um,
with like the
yeah,
Arceus versus
Arceus.
Bibarel, and just like Frank's list is like very, very straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was like Whimsicott in general, I think is probably tier 2. It's hard to almost say it's not tier 1 though, because I feel like there's like, especially now that Malamar's kind of on the downswing. Rapid Strike Malamar's not really a deck right now. It's hard for me to not say that Whimsicott's not tier 1 because you can beat Mew, you can beat Arceus, you can beat Urshifu, like you can beat all these decks, and none of the matchups feel unfavorable. It almost feels like they're all 50-50s. So for the current shape of the meta, I would almost say that Whimsicott is probably a tier 1 deck, especially if we're putting Urshifu as tier 1 alongside Mew.
Hmm.
I think maybe Whimsicott gets in there as well. I haven't played enough of it to know if it's like maybe it's just a little bit too inconsistent for like it to fit the tier 1 like that. It loses too much to literally everything because of inconsistencies. So that's the one thing I've come up with it, and we saw that from Frank a couple times on stream. In the finals as well as up against Gabriel Smart in round 6 or 7, I think, in day
Hmm.
one.
Hmm.
It's just like it comes up a little bit, and I've had that experience in my testing as well. And as far as like changes I'd make from Frank's list, I definitely cut the Averys for sure. Like as far as like things I would change moving forwards, but everything else is I think pretty solid.
Yeah, something I haven't tested this yet, but I want to try it out. And this might just be like not that good. but I kind of want to put 4 Cramomatics in this deck because
You don't have anything to discard
you
with
have plenty
them.
of stuff to discard because there's a lot of you want to play heavy fan for all the Arceus decks, but if you're not using your fans, um they're useless and unburnable cards. And so now they become just things that clog your hand up and you can't draw cards with Octillery. I literally watched a game. It was Finn Lynch versus Zach Cooper in the field of EUIC, where Finn had Bibarel in play for like 3 turns with a totally unplayable hand, was just playing off of his top deck every single turn. And it was just clogged up with some bad item cards and like useless things. Could never get down below 5, and so was just kind of holding on to the hand because he knew Zach didn't play Marnie. And but had like, some extra air balloons in there, your extra EXP share. You really only need 1, right? And it's like sometimes having the Cramomatic is a consistency out in theory, right? To getting you an energy drop, to getting you the EXP share you need on the bench, to getting you whatever you might need. And there's plenty of item cards because you don't have to play Crushing Hammer every single turn. Crushing Hammer is really good
Yeah.
for like the early game, but once you set up, Crushing Hammers aren't as good as they, would be in the early turns. So it's like you can Cramomatic that away. It thins your hand down 2 cards, even if you flip tails, so you can draw more with your Bibarel. So I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just a thought I've had. Haven't really put any testing into it, but I agree. Like the consistency is probably the main issue with the deck and it's not like inconsistent. It's just clunky. Like you're kind of just playing off of that top deck a lot of the time. And if you're not playing a supporter card for turn and you can't pare your hand down for Bibarel, you're just kind of reliant with what you got.
Yeah. I think it's like the main issue with the deck for sure. But I think it's pretty solid. Yeah, it probably fits in tier 2. Maybe I'm trying to push a little bit hard for tier 1, but because you don't have like a ridiculously powerful matchup against anything. You can kind of beat everything though. So the deck does feel solid, but you are a little bit reliant on drawing the path to the peak or the fan of waves or the crushing hammer and getting heads immediately. So as soon as you whiff those and then the Arceus player gets the turn 2 Trinity Nova with their DTE, then you're going to get in trouble, right? So if the Mew player gets another turn with their DTE, or one of their Fusion Strike energies in play sticks, and then they get attached to basic energy or Elsa Sparkle again, then all of a sudden it can snowball really, really quickly out of your control. So like you need all those things to land. So it doesn't feel like a deck with a ton of, skill expression, right? Especially when you compare it to something like the Urshifu deck, there's so many choices, so many options. Your opponent has to worry about so much. Whimsicott's kind of like attach, go, get some Crushing Hammer heads, find my fan of waves in time, right? And then just roll from there. So, and yeah, now that's out of the bag a little bit more, I think a lot of people are going to be more prepared for the matchup. So people aren't going to be making the mistakes when they're playing their Arceus deck and they go first. They'll attach their basic energy, not their DTE. All those little things that can add up to, sneak victories because people just don't know what the heck your deck's doing. All of a sudden, everyone knows what your deck's doing. And especially because everyone's playing against it online right now because of how popular it is. Like, it'll definitely lose that kind of surprise factor as well. But I still think it's solid even with all those things, I guess, going against it. I don't think, but another thing about it, though, no one's really teching for the matchup. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's hard to tech for it as well. So maybe that's the reason. But yeah, I don't think anyone's really teching for Whimsicott overly. So you're not going to run into any like hard techs. You're just like, well, I guess I lose. You're not going to be like the Urshifu deck and run to someone playing like Dunsparce Manaphy, Hoopa V, and like that.
Right.
Even though when I've ran into that, it's actually not that bad for Urshifu, but it's a lot harder than just hitting Arceus and Teleon.
Well, speaking of, those different techs in Arceus, this is one of the biggest questions we got on Twitter because I think there's obviously a lot of Arceus decks out there, and it's the deck in the format that it feels like has the most variety, right? Because you can just, it's colorless. You can put it with so many different things, and there's obviously so many different tech options you can have. And heading into this weekend, which Arceus variant do we feel like is the best choice? Is it still Arceus Inteleon, just kind of the straightforward list? Do you still like the Arceus Dark deck that we were both really liking a good bit heading into EUIC? It didn't really have the best results. I think Alex Wilson got top 64 with a list that was really similar to the list you and I had kind of talked about. I don't know which Arceus variant do you like the best right now?
I don't even. There's just so many. I still think I enjoy playing Arceus Bibarel the most, and I think if I play Arceus at Indiana, it'll be the Arceus Bibarel just because I enjoy playing it. I don't think it's like the best, maybe, but I think Arceus Inteleon is maybe the one that I think is maybe the worst. I feel like the deck just doesn't have enough options to keep up throughout games. Um, and I think probably struggles the most now up against the Urshifu deck because they can Urshifu for a while with Cheryl and Palpat and all that, and then they eventually get to the Moltres that one hit KOs Arceus. So I think yeah, just like the playing water build. I think you need the Hoopa V, and if you play the dark package with Malters, you get Hoopa V in there as well. So like you get all those options. So I think the Inteleon build is just too linear overall. It's like it doesn't have enough options to win games consistently. I think in from what I've like seen and played with it as of late. But I think like the the Malters package builds, or even the ones with like a little bit of a lighter Arceus, like the Nick Moffat, Ian Robb type deck. I think that one's still pretty solid as well. Like there's just so much of it. It's just, and Duraludon's getting better as well. Like Arceus Duraludon's becoming a way better deck as well. There's a lot of good ones, and you need to tech for Urshifu in some way though, for sure, unless you're playing like Arceus Duraludon.
A really interesting deck that actually did pretty well at EUIC, that was not something that was on a lot of people's radars going into the tournament, was Arceus Lycanroc. There was quite a few people playing it in day 2, and one of them ended up finishing 20th place, Joshua Huggard, with the Arceus Lycanroc. And it still played Crobat VMAX, so it was like a split of darkness energies and fighting energies. I don't know if the other lists were like similar to this one or what, but yeah, I mean, Lycanroc, how do you feel about that kind of option? I would almost prefer having something like that compared to just the Inteleon, because like just gives you, there's like more stuff you can do with it, I feel like.
I don't know. I feel like that just like everyone has Dunsparce now, so you're just kind of
Yeah,
putting
that's
a three
true.
prize Pokemon in play at that point. And I don't even know like yeah, I mean, you still got to find room for stuff like and this list specifically, I'm looking at the list that you're looking at. It has the Hoopa
Hmm.
already, so they were prepared for the Hoopa ahead of its time. They are with the for the Urshifu ahead of the wave, so they're ready to go. But the Lycanroc itself, I'm not like overly uh intrigued by. The list is definitely less consistent than something like that we have been big fans of, which like one of the big things that both of our lists or what we kind of play towards was like having a good Mew matchup with like heavy Pats of the Peak and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Heavier Marnie count to be more aggressive about that, and we see there's like none of that going on in this list. So there's like you gotta kind of pick what you want to tech for, I guess, a little bit at some point as well. But I just don't think the Lycanroc does enough, just because everyone's gonna be playing, or most people will probably be playing Dunsparce in their own Arceus decks. And sure, you can KO it first, you got to get it, and then you got to get into your Lycanroc after that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a few other really interesting Arceus builds in day 2 of EUIC. The Arceus Malmar VMAX, which we actually saw on the stream. I think Malmar is one of the more powerful VMAXs, but it's just, a lot to get set up. I actually think Malmar, a little sneak peek to something we'll probably talk about in the future, but I think Malmar VMAX gets pretty good with Astral Radiance, just getting access to Dark Patch and Roxanne. But for now, Malamar VMAX also seems like a fun partner for Arceus V Star. And there's also the Beedrill deck, the single strike mustard, the Flygon. There was a decent amount of that in day 2 as well, and it had pretty solid finishes. And there was also Magnus Peterson's Urshifu Arceus deck that also was playing Beedrill, so it was like Urshifu instead of Flygon. So yeah, there's still just so much going on and so many different options of things you can do with Arceus. And honestly, I don't know that any of them are like bad choices. I think you can play
Yeah.
Arceus and pair it with whatever, your favorite flavor of the day is, because it's just that solid of a card, right?
Yeah, and then if as long as like it'll make anything consistent, so now your opponent has no idea what they're worrying about or what they're playing
Yeah,
into, so
yeah.
you can have a little bit of a surprise factor. And actually, the Flygon's actually I think pretty good right now because Flygon actually one hit KOs Urshifu with a Goon Ping or a Choice Belt. So like Arceus, Beedrill, Flygon, you get a Manaphy down there or Dunsparce, I don't know, one of them to protect your bench or protect your Arceus from getting one hit KO'd, and then load up a Flygon. If they want to use Urshifu, it's going to get KO'd in the next turn, and maybe you can kind of roll from there. So there's like a little bit more life in a deck like that right now. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many ways to play Arceus. It's kind of like, yeah, you can kind of do whatever you want, and it's like they're all going to be pretty solid, I think, at the end of the day. But some will be, better than others. Um, Overall, and then there was like even the other, yeah, there was the Arceus and Teleon Beedrill deck as well They're pretty close to making top 8, I believe, if I remember correctly. But
Was
yeah,
that
there
the one
was
that the Japanese player played,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, they were in top 32. I think they lost like the second to last rounds.
Yeah, they lost to Bradner. They had that one on
Yeah,
stream.
yeah. That's right.
That
Reggie.
deck was that was actually like a way closer game than I thought it would be too. I didn't think it was gonna be close at all. I was about to be like I was about to like go make some food during the stream or something. Like game one, they got stomped, and then game two, I think Bradner had a pretty bad start, and then game three, they had like the turn two boss on the lone Urshifu, and it was actually getting close. Then Bradner almost whiffed off of Marnie, but
Yeah.
they ended up pulling it out in the end. But yeah, I didn't think it was gonna be that close, but it was that was definitely an interesting deck to have the bees in there. He of course
Yeah, I
always so
think
strong
Beedrill
against
is
Mew.
like just pretty solid when you can set it up, but it's obviously got, the consistency problems and where does it fit the best. I think it's still probably best to play it alongside Flygon. And yeah, what you said about Flygon being decent right now is, it makes sense to me because I think the problem with Beedrill into Urshifu, right? You feel like, oh yeah, Beedrill is so good against Urshifu, it plays Rapid Strike energy. But the thing about Urshifu is that when it attaches Rapid Strike energy, it's usually discarding it right away, which makes
Yeah,
Beedrill just not good against it.
yeah, and that makes Beedrill. Yeah, it makes Beedrill, and that's actually just exactly what happened in Bradner's match up against that deck. Is just discard them and they're gone. You don't have to worry about it. And they didn't play Dunsparce or Manaphy, and that's why I thought it
Yeah.
would be such a one-sided affair. But yeah, you get rid of it, and then the Beedrill's no longer an issue, and then you hit it, and then they Cheryl, and then they Gale Thrust you, and kind of repeat that from there.
I think the biggest and like most popular question we had on Twitter was, should I put Manaphy in my Arceus deck or just in decks in general? And we'll talk more, I guess, about in general later on. But yeah, I think the answer for both of us, as far as Arceus decks are concerned, is yes. You should be playing Manaphy and Dunsparce in your Arceus deck this weekend.
Yeah, I wanna say you don't have to play both if you play Hoopa V, but you maybe have to be honest. Like I haven't tested enough of that kind of matchup to know for sure if you need both, um, or want both. You don't
Hmm.
want to play both, and you'd prefer to play Dunsparce because there's more than just Urshifu Moltres as far as fighting random fighting stuff goes. You prefer to play Dunsparce, but it does kind of almost feel like you have to play both. To be honest, the more I've kind of tested the matchup, the more I've played from both sides. It feels like if they don't have both, you're going to be in trouble. But even if you get both down, if they get like a good turn to Avery, then you're still going to maybe be in trouble. Because if you have to go to like Manaphy, Dunsparce, Arceus, you have no shady dealings next turn. That can still put you in an awkward spot as well. So yeah, I don't know. Urshifu's making everything weird to have to deal with. And it's weird. It's funny because like just like sometimes when you just add a Manaphy, you just win a matchup, right? If you did that against Jolteon, you just win in so many decks. But
Hmm.
it's not the same way for Urshifu. Urshifu has too many options in the build right now that even adding Manaphy plus Dunsparce does not just win you the matchup, which is crazy.
And something that I thought was a good question actually comes from Xander Perot over on Twitter and says, "How many recovery cards would you play in Arceus to counter Urshifu?" Because I think just playing the cards isn't quite enough. You need like either the Clara or the Ordinary Rod to get these pieces back. Because if your Manaphy just gets boss KO'd, then they're gonna have Gmax Rapid Flow, free reign. If they boss your Dunsparce and KO it, they're going to be one hit KOing all your Arceus. So I almost feel like having a recovery card, at least one, is necessary. Is there ever a world where you would play more than one? Probably not, right?
No, I don't think so. I think you play if you're playing Moltres, you already play Clara, so you're good. If you're stuck on the straightforward Water and Teleon build of Arceus, then I think one rescue carrier is your best option
Yeah.
because it's faster and you just don't need to recover your Arceus pretty much ever with that deck. You don't care. And then with Arceus B-Barrel, I just wouldn't play any, I don't think. Like it's too awkward to find and then utilize. I would rather just be more consistent and then just get them out fast and just like hopefully they can do enough. Because like if you play the Hoopa V and something like the Arceus
Right.
B-Barrel, you'll load that up. And if they want to go into the Urshifu V Max, which they don't have to, they can 100 Furious Blows if you don't have Dunsparce for 1 KO anyways. But the Hoopa will get you 3 prize cards. You can kind of roll from there and hope it's enough. And you're spamming Marnie at them. So you got a pretty good shot just going about it like that. But I think, yeah, the water build, I mean, if you're playing Baby Moltres, you got Clara. I think that's enough. You don't need to play more than that. Maybe you go up to 2 Clara because of that, I guess. But if you're playing the straightforward water build, I think a rescue carrier is probably the best option. Or if you feel like if you're testing it and you feel like you can beat them, if you play both, get value out of them while they're there. If that's enough, then that can also just be enough to win games, right? Like I think Marnie, and I think people are understanding how good Marnie is against decks, and maybe even
Yes.
increasing their Marnie count. So throw those both down, hit them with a Marnie. What are they actually doing on their turn? You know?
Yeah, Marnie good in general, but specifically very good against Urshifu. And I think that's another reason that we saw Marnie be so dominant at UIC is that there is a severe lack of Marnie in people's lists right now.
Yeah.
Arceus decks are playing one or two at the most. Some of the Mew decks were playing one copy, but other than that, like Malmar not playing Marnie, the Urshifu mirrors not playing Marnie, the single prize Hoopa Dark Box, Intellion deck, not really playing Marnie. So there's a lot of stuff out there that's not playing Marnie that's a pretty reasonable percentage of the field. But
Yeah.
speaking of Mew VMAX and also the Marnie, before we get to that, has Mew VMAX finally fallen out of tier 1? Just one in top 8. Did end up making it to the top 4. It feels like there's a lot of variety in the format right now. And though I think Mew was probably still the most popular deck in the field, it was the most popular deck still in day 2. It's, besides that first regionals of the season, has lacked the big finish that I think everyone was expecting from it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's out of tier 1. I think it's still tier 1. I think that's just like you still see all of these decks trying to hard counter Mew, and then we'll see less of that. I think with Urshifu from EUIC, we'll see less hard counters, or less people committing all of their counter spots and tech spots to the Mew VMAX matchup, and we'll see a couple more committed towards Urshifu. But I mean, that's kind of still tells how good the deck is. I mean, it still made top 8 at EUIC. Kaiwin lost the winning in to
Yeah.
Gustavo. There was a couple more in
Yeah, there
top
was
16
3 in the
as
top
well.
16, including
Yeah.
Kaiwin.
So like still seems pretty solid to me. And I think the deck has been getting, kind of getting hard countered for a long time. It's finally going to let up a little bit, which is going to make a little bit more room for it to have a little bit more success, I feel like. But it's been kind of doing fine throughout all of these people trying to hard counter it. So I think that just kind of is a testament that it's definitely still a tier 1 deck, if not still like the tier S deck. But Urshifu is definitely putting up a good argument for that. So I think we'll put it in tier 1 alongside Urshifu at the very least.
And I think the big question for Mew players going into this weekend is what tech cards should we play? And that's actually a Twitter question we got from at Mr. Sharney. What tech cards should Mew play currently? Echoing Horn has been a popular one for a while. I'm still a fan of that because it's really good against the Arceus decks. And, there's been a little resurgence of the Arceus Duraludon. The Horn is still, I think, pretty solid. Also, one Marnie is a card that you and I have both been playing in our Mew list for a while. And I think
Yeah.
that a Marnie is necessary for the Urshifu matchup which is weird to say, right? Because you're like, Urshifu's weak to Psychic as a VMAX. It's like an easy matchup for me. But just the way the deck is built, they don't even put Urshifu in play in the matchup. So unless they start it, you're not going to get those 2 or 3 prizes from an Urshifu. And then you're just kind of having to wait to play into their Moltres. And so I think it's important for Mew to have Marnie so you can, on a key turn, play it to break that massive hand that they've built up when they're trying to build towards a big Moltres play.
No, yeah, I think the Marnie's basically essential at this point. I think everyone's going to be, most people should be rocking that, if not everyone rocking that at this point.
At least
'Cause,
one,
yeah,
and I would even consider a second one, to be
yeah, I mean,
honest. Or
I
like a
could see it.
Pal
I could
Pad or
definitely see it.
something.
I almost would want to go the Palpad route so you can recover
Yeah.
bosses. But yeah, I think Marnie's basically a staple, but I don't even know there's not much else to tech in there besides that. I've been thinking about going to like like the like fourth boss or the Palpad, especially because in the Urshifu matchup, like early turns, you just want to be KOing Sobbles and Drizzles. Like that's literally it. And that's why the escape ropes are so good in that matchup too. They send up their Snorlax, and you're like, all right, escape rope, give me the Sobble. All right, knock it out, repeat. And then on the third, when you go into your 3 prize turn, you're like, all right, boss, Psychic Leap a Sobble. So and then you hit him with the Marnie eventually down the road. But no, I could definitely see it being worth to to include the Pal Pad, maybe second Marnie, but yeah, I think a Marnie at the least should become the deck. And I still like the Horn as well. I would like to not play the Horn because I'm kind of getting bored of it because there's
Mhm.
so many times where it's not useful and like yeah, it's good, but it's so good against the Arceus deck. It feels like you kind of got to keep it around for that.
Yeah, another card that I've thought about. I don't think I would play it, but what you were talking about with having the fourth boss because you just want to be KOing Sobbles early, because
Yeah.
that also limits them from plays. A card I've thought about a little bit is that Fusion Strike Ice Cube from Brilliant Stars. Uh, I think the main problem is that it takes up a bench spot. But the Ice Cube I think is kind of cool. Block Slider is its attack. For a water and a colorless, you do 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each Fusion Strike energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So I would feel a little bit better about playing a card like this if it did a little bit more damage per
Yeah.
energy. Like if it could get to the point where it was one hit KOing like a Crobat on the bench, that would make it maybe a little bit better. But then also the fact that most of these decks are probably going to be playing Manaphy this weekend as well makes it a lot worse. But, it's a cute little tech that I've,
Yeah.
kept my eye on. I think in a different meta, Ice Cube could definitely, have its time to shine.
Yeah, I actually like that. And once it's a water colorless, right? So you can
Yeah.
attack with itself eventually as well. Just start picking
Hmm.
off.
Hmm.
I actually like that. I might try that out. I actually like
Oh.
the ice cube. I don't think I own one, but that actually, yeah, because I mean, that's your goal in the early game is just to literally sit there and bop Sobbles and bop Drizziles and then eventually Marnie 'em. But yeah, so that would be like another route to guarantee that. Because even the escape ropes, if they got like a Snorlax and a Mew or a Snorlax and a Hoopa down or something to play around the escape rope,
Hmm.
you're not getting that Sobble or that Drizzile KO you're looking for. That's what you're after in the early stages of the game. So yeah, I could
And
see
you can do
the
it on turn one, right? You can Alyssa Sparkle to it, attach,
yeah.
and yeah, it's
Yes, sir. What's its HP? Is he surviving Hoopa?
it's 110.
Oh, tank too. Wow, would you look at that? Yeah, it definitely seems like it could have its fit. But yeah, I don't think there's anything too spicy to add to Mew anymore. I think we've kind of been around it, just kind of Marnie at this point. And then I guess the other, and you said yeah, Whimsicott was like that made it to the finals, the crazier deck. But I would say the craziest deck to actually make
Yeah,
top
yeah,
eight was
yeah.
definitely the Sylveon.
Hmm.
But it's definitely not a deck I would prepare for. But do you think it has a chance to kind of repeat its success?
I mean, I would be surprised if it did. I don't expect it to be widely played. I think, if it's, I think that deck making top eight really just shows that if you know a deck really well and it's a deck you've practiced with, it's not a bad idea to just stick with that deck for a tournament and you
Yeah.
can still see success, even though it might be a deck that everyone else is like, oh, that's inconsistent. You should just play meta. You can still make cut or make a deep run, even if Ty had not made top eight. Even making top 32 with Sylveon, I would have said would have been like an insanely good accomplishment. Because yeah, I mean, it's just not a deck that I think anyone was expecting or had much respect for. But yeah, it just goes to show what play your comfort and you as long as it's not just actually terrible,
Yeah.
um you can
You definitely need
still
to
you can
like
still make something happen for sure.
yeah, at some point you should switch up decks for, the sake of learning a new deck is a great way to learn the game better as well. Like just simply playing the same deck over and over and over again, you're learning that much less, right? Like
Hmm.
so picking up new decks, trying out new decks, you're going to learn that much more about the game and all that. And at some point if your deck is truly terrible, you should probably switch it up, which is a deck that I think is not in a great spot. Raptor Strike Malamar, I don't know if it's truly terrible. I'm not a huge fan of it right now. Chip, do you think any different?
Yeah, I don't think it's great right now either, which is really weird to say because like 2 tournaments ago we were calling it a tier 1 deck. And
It
it's
was
just
feeling good.
crazy how much the meta changes and adjusts to things. Yeah, a lot of decks are playing Avery right now. Avery's very good against Rapid Strike Malamar. It's also good against any other Intellion engine deck, but very good against Rapid Strike Malamar. People have just kind of learned the deck a little bit more as well, it feels like, so they know kind of how to play the matchup. There's all the decks kind of have unique different things they can do. Like the Arceus Intellion deck can go for, the Aqua Bullet, KO Inkay on the bench play, right, with a quick shooting and a Zigzagoon, or Mew can choose to go second and go for the glistening droplets on Oricorio, try to target down the lone Inkay they get in play and just buy a turn. Like there's just a lot that all the popular decks can do to play to that matchup, and people have kind of learned those different niche things at this point.
Yeah, now you have to play the Manaphy for sure. Like you can't not
Definitely.
play the Manaphy for the Urshifu matchup. And even then, they're gonna Avery you. You're gonna put the Manaphy down. You're gonna
Yep.
fill your bench, and then you're gonna get Avery, and that's gonna hurt a lot. We did see a cute tech in Seb's list that I don't know how high they placed in the tournament at BUIC, but they did pretty well. They played the Guru,
Yeah.
and their reasoning kind of for that was like it would protect their boss specifically and kind of move their boss around. Now, the one thing I thought was interesting about Seb's list, they didn't play a quick ball, so they could not find the Guru besides literally drawing into it. They didn't even play like great balls or anything.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing, and Joe and I were actually talking about this inclusion in Seb's list because Joe is a huge Rapid
Yeah.
Strike Malmar fan. He obviously went 9-0 at Liverpool with it, made top 8 with the deck. And yeah, he was like, Seb's reasoning for it is like, if I draw my non-Rapid Strike cards, I can put them back into the deck, and I can most likely find a Rapid Strike card to do more damage. But Joe's like, what happens when you draw the Oranguru? Because that is a non-Rapid Strike card, and your only way to get it is drawing into it. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea is cute for sure, but I don't know that it's like fine. It's fine, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I would necessarily be playing it. It does make it gives you an easy decision of what to discard off of Avery, which I guess is a plus.
I mean, I think I would definitely include a quick ball. And speaking of that, the a Malmar deck in the finals of the most recent late night tournament with I believe over 300 players is Malamar with an Oranguru. Now they do play a quick ball and 3 great balls, so they can find the Oranguru, but they're kind of copying the same thing that Seb had with like a lower Inteleon line, the 4-2-1.
Oh, it won the tournament. Yeah, it just finished.
Or
It
did
won
end
the
up winning? Yeah,
tournament.
and
Yeah.
they have the Manaphy in there. So maybe we just, and also the double escape rope, which is something I've been talking about for a little while in Malamar, is the double escape rope.
And no
'Cause I think-
boss.
Yeah, because in the Mew matchup, it's specifically great. And then even up against Arceus decks, that first turn they have that big Arceus V-Star. If they don't got the second Arceus V-Star on the bench, that's such an easier knockout. You get the escape rope before you even use your ambition sometimes. Just bring something better up. Quick ball for your Guru, get that in play, and then you're getting knockouts way easier until you get to those mid-game, late-game situations where Malmar can hit like 10, 12 rapid strike cards, and you're 1KOing literally anything. So really interesting list. Avery might still be rough to deal with, but it definitely looks like it's a little bit more prepared for the meta overall.
Yeah, only 2 Karina's Focus and only 3 Spiral Energy. So in order to
Yeah.
fit some of these other consistency things, the Great Balls and the Quick Ball, in order to find your non-Rapid Strike cards, you have to cut down on Rapid Strike cards. So it always does scare me a little bit with a deck like this that's reliant on a specific type of card, right? Malamar, you need to get Rapid Strike cards. So when you're cutting Rapid Strike cards for non-Rapid Strike cards, just inherently, it's taking away from your deck's overall strategy, which always scares me a little bit.
Well, the Great Balls will probably find rapid strike cards, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but they're in there because you're wanting them to get your Oranguru and Manaphy, which like is good in the early game, I guess. But like, I don't know, just like taking
That's kinda-
a hard Rapid Strike card out of the deck for
yeah,
something that could get you a Rapid Strike card,
it does like kind of like thin out your deck a little bit more to the point where you're finding your scoop up nets and your rescue carriers more often, though, right? Because
sure.
like instead of like having a rapid strike card in the hand and putting it back in and having 2 rapid strike cards in the deck, you burn the Great Ball, get a rapid strike card. Now you're down one. You have 1 less card in your deck. That's not one of those key cards that kind of accelerates your deck. So the list is cool. I think I'm definitely gonna try it out myself. I guess later today on my stream, because actually that I like the Guru is something I've been meaning to try, and now the Great Balls have given me like another like I think there could be something there for sure as well.
Definitely. And another deck that I think a lot of people were really excited about because everyone loves to see what Sander brings to tournaments is Sander's Umbreon wall deck. So I still see people calling this a control deck online. It's not really a control deck, is it? It's like a
Yeah.
wall, like a stall deck
Wailord.
more so. But yeah, where do you feel like this Umbreon deck kind of sits right now? Now that it's kind of a known quantity, is there adjustments that should be made to Sanders' deck after, kind of seeing how the meta's developed? Do you need the full three Flannerys? Do you need like all those like I don't know, is like the single strike energies like are all these pieces super super necessary? Or and like how do you feel like it's positioned right now in the meta? It definitely feels like it's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's great. I think the Urshifu matchup is awkward because they can
Hmm.
start punching and then you have to like heal every turn, which you can't do because
Yeah.
otherwise they Gmax rapid flow. So, and like, yeah, I think like the Flanneries and the single strike energy are necessary because that's your Mew matchup. Is like you either have to be attacking with a Mew Umbreon soon to like take energy out of play, or ideally you're just removing the energy from play with Yveltal plus Flannery. The one thing that I think could probably cut is the Jolteon line. Someone mentioned that the only reason Sander played that was for the Malamar matchup, which I'm not 100% sure on. But if it is only for the Malamar matchup, Malamar's not super popular right now, so I could definitely see that being unnecessary. But yeah, it definitely is more like a wall deck than a control deck. It's kind of like, Whale Lord Stall from way back in the day. I guess it's still maybe a thing in expanded. I don't even know. I guess like yeah, there's like other wall decks in expanded now with
Yeah.
dolls and stuff. But yeah, it's basically like that. You just try and infinitely make it so your opponent can't draw prize cards while they dock out, or you very slowly win through doing 30 damage with Eldegoss every other turn, every turn. Yeah, so there's that. It's definitely a interesting deck, but I don't think it's not like some new broken control. It's not some new broken wall deck that everyone's going to start playing,
Yeah.
kind of like Wailord was, because it's hard to play, and the deck overall I don't think it has like the best matchup spread.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see someone make cut with something really similar to Sanders' deck. I wouldn't be surprised to see one in top eight. Because I do think like this strategy is solid, and people have a hard time playing against those type of decks because you just have to adjust your thinking so much compared to how you normally would play your deck because the game is just going to be much longer, much grindier, and not every player, if they haven't tested it, can just like adjust on the fly to whatever those type of strategies are. So I think
Yeah,
it definitely could, make cut. I wouldn't be surprised to see one in cut, but I don't know that it'll necessarily like win the turn. I would be, I would not expect it to like win the tournament. It's definitely not broken, like you said. So,
yeah.
and then last thing we'll talk about before we move on to the new Pokemon Go cards that have been revealed. Do you feel like there are any past popular decks that are due for a resurgence? I've seen some Ice Rider popping up in online events. Connor Fenton made top 32 with a Shadow Rider Whimsicott deck. So could we see, Shadow Rider come back into the meta a little bit? And then also Duraludon, a deck that's really not been popular at all. Feels like it could be positioned to be pretty decent right now.
I mean, maybe Duraludon, but I don't think the other two have any hope. Maybe
Yeah.
Duraludon, but and then Duraludon's even like Duraludon's kind of always been around, but Shadow Rider, you're not beating Mew. Ice Rider, you're not beating Mew. And now Shadow Rider has to deal with Baby Moltres literally everywhere because of Mew. And Ice Rider does have a good Arceus matchup. They don't have a great Urshifu matchup though. They can't want to KO it very easily, and then the Cheryl comes down. And are you going to play your own Cheryl? No, because then you can't Melanie. So I don't think, yeah, Ice Rider. There's still no hope for Ice Rider. Little hope for Shadow Rider, and Duraludon's solid. And I feel like the meta is still kind of like trending towards getting better for Duraludon. So Duraludon's got that going for it for sure. But yeah, speaking of those Pokemon Go cards, the biggest one I feel like out of the one that's most talked about, I think for sure, is the Stadium card.
Yeah.
Um,
Before we get
Pokestop.
into the like what the actual cards are, because we'll look at all the ones that have been revealed and talk about our thoughts on all of them. I just kind of want to talk about these like mini sets in
Okay, yeah,
general because it feels like we get a mini set, a collector set like this every year. It feels like whether
yeah.
it's Shining Fates, Hidden Fates. This is almost a little more unique. It feels more like the Detective Pikachu type of set almost where I mean I guess this has a few more cards in it compared to Detective Pikachu, but it always feels like these sets mostly don't change the meta but then have like one or two cards that will make at least somewhat of an impact, right?
you have anything from Detective? I remember having to get Detective Pikachu Snubbles, but I never used them. I remember getting them though.
For Gramble, that's funny. I
I
think
I think it was
there was
Professor
like
Snubble.
the Greninja that was like, I
Oh
think
yeah,
it did okay at a regionals one time, and then
but at UIC, yeah,
the Ditto was pretty decent as a one of in Reshizard. I think that Cody Walensky made top 8 at Madison regionals that year
yep,
with the
yep,
Detective Pikachu Ditto, because you could just like as a one prizer copy your opponent's Reshizard.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know that it was ever really that good though. Like those cards were like, it definitely feels like these sets are either have very fringe cards that probably won't really ever see that much play, or they have like one, maybe two like really good cards, and everything else is kind of just meh.
Yeah, more so okay cards than anything. I feel like not even like that good. They're all like pretty. What did Victini Prism come from? Was that one of these
That was
sets, or
from
was that like a
Dragon's
bigger?
Majesty. So Victini Prism was one from a mini set, and then I mean like Zoroark
Is that
GX was from Shining Legends. Like there's definitely
yeah,
been cards in the past that have had big time impacts from these mini sets, but it's usually just like one or two cards.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not surprised. I mean, not yeah. I don't really expect much from these sets ever, really. To be honest, they don't have really have like a huge immediate impact. But I guess like we have had. I guess Zork is the only one. Was Shining Legends? Was that like a big set release? I think that was a bigger set than.
No, it's 75 cards, which I mean this set is 78 cards. So
Okay, we haven't gotten all of them yet, right? They only leaked some of
yeah,
them, or is
we've
this
only gotten a
basically it?
few revealed so far. And there's a few of them, including the Mewtwo V Star, which I think is going to be, obviously a fan
Yeah.
favorite. Everyone loves Mewtwo, but I don't know that this card is that good. It's got 280 hit points. Psy Purge deals 90 damage, or sorry, it does 90 times. You discard up to 3 psychic energy from your Pokemon, and this attack does 90 damage for each card you discarded in this way. So you can get to 270 with a Choice Belt, 300 damage. You knock out all the other V stars, but it's pretty high maintenance getting that many energies in
Yeah.
play to discard turn after turn after turn after turn. And its V star power is Star Raid, 120 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon V, which, feels like kind of that Black Ray GX, or, Holy Star, if you're thinking all the way back to Rayquaza Gold Star. And those attacks have been pretty decent in the past. And I think if this V Star power was on like a basic, like if there was basic V Stars,
Yeah.
Star Raid would like probably be played at some point in some capacity. But as it stands on a stage 1, this card feels pretty poor to me, honestly.
Yeah, it's also weak to dark, which is like not only not great now, but next set gets worse. I feel like,
Yeah.
but Star Red I actually think is pretty good, and maybe could be comboed with some kind of spread deck overall. But by itself, yeah, that I mean, I guess you get up to 300 damage with the Psy Purge, and we do have that Clefairy coming out that accelerates
You get a
psychic energy
bunch
to
of
other
energies in
Clefairies.
play with that thing.
Yeah, that so you can ramp them out. You can ramp them out with the Clefairy.
You've also got
Mewtwo goes
Galarian
in from there.
Articuno as an option, which has
Yep.
like the same ability as Galarian Moltres, but for psychic energies instead. And it also has like a spread-esque attack where it does 120 damage to anything. So you could set, it's an option, I guess. But it just feels like something like this would be very high maintenance. I think that the real potential for this card would be in the V-Star power as like a 1/1 line in some spread deck at some point, right?
Yeah, it's got potential, but being weak to dark, I think is the biggest hindrance here. But probably the most hyped card, um, from the set, and I literally thought that people were reading item instead of trainer, or trainer instead of item when I saw everyone hyping this on Twitter, because I don't think it's that good. But Pokestop, once during each player's turn, that player may discard 3 cards from the top of their discard all 3 of them. If a player discarded any item,
From the
not
top of their
trainer
deck,
cards,
from the top of their deck. The way you
from
said
top of
that,
their deck.
it made it sound like you're discarding cards from your discard pile. The way
Oh no,
you just
discard the
said
top
that.
3 cards from their
Yeah,
deck.
yeah,
If a
yeah.
player discards any item, not trainer cards, in this way, they may put those item cards in their hand. So good for finding item cards, but you're discarding the top 3 cards of your deck, and you only get to keep the items. So of course everyone thinks Mew when they see this card, and I can see it as a 1-up for some late game push. But early game, you're risking your energy, your Pokemon. It just kind of feels a little bit too risky as like a staple in that deck. I could see it in some decks that like to go a little bit more aggressive. I saw Stefan mention Zacian Zamazenta, but I was like, that deck hasn't been good for
Yeah,
a
well, I think
long
what
time.
Stefan was saying, not about that deck specifically,
Yeah,
but for
yeah,
like that type of deck. Like that is a deck from the past that could have
yeah.
utilized this stadium very, very well. And I think with Dark
That's
Patch
true.
coming out, there's a lot more potential for something like this to, make play. And I do think this card is really good, but I don't think it's going to be like a card that a lot of decks play. I think it's going to be
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good in specific decks. Something like what Stefan mentioned. A deck that I think could be kind of cool would be like a Fusion Strike deck with just Genesects and Hoopas. And you can play Metal Saucer and Dark Patch now with Astral Radiance coming out. Pokestop, mill your energies. You're flying through the deck with Genesect, obviously, and you've got all these patch cards to get your energies back into play. So, I mean, I do think that there is a place for this card, and I do think it is very, very good, but it is a very specific deck that could utilize
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah, it could have its moments for sure. I never think of those cards being like that ridiculously good personally because it's like it's good because all those other cards around it are good and the deck would probably survive without this card. It's not like a make or break card. It's just like, yeah, it's pretty good in
I
those
mean, I don't
decks.
know.
But yeah, I think
It's very much like a turbo card,
yeah.
right?
I can see it
And
working with the dark ride for sure, like a turbo dark build for sure. Yeah.
definitely.
You can see it there.
I mean, and with like, there's just so many powerful items that are coming out too. Like, I think there's a lot of potential for this card to, be used in things. It maybe after thinking about it a little bit, it's like not quite as. Because I was also someone who tweeted that I thought this card was like insane. It's maybe not insane, but I do think it is really good in the right deck for sure.
Yeah.
Another interesting few supporters to talk about that were revealed from the set. We have Spark, Blanche, and Candela. Spark, Blanche, and Candela, who are the leaders of each of the Team Go or Pokemon Go teams. Team Instinct, Valor, and Mystic. I don't know, Azul. Are you a team when you played Pokemon Go? Which team were you on? Do you remember?
I think I was Team Valor. Yeah.
Valor. Is that's the
The
red one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't ever remember. It's been a long time. I played Pokemon Go a good bit when it came out, just about like
Yeah.
just like pretty much everyone did, right? But it's been a while since I've played the game. But I'm not gonna lie, these cards are it's kind of making me remember that Pokemon Go exists. I see a lot of people playing it at Pokemon tournaments. Maybe I'll download it again. Who knows? But I was on Team Instinct for whatever that's worth, the Lightning team. But anyway, yeah, so these cards all have a really similar effect. You draw 2 cards, and if you drew any cards in this way, you flip a coin. If heads, attach a, whatever energy for that type of, whatever that trainer is. That type of energy
Yeah.
card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. So Spark gets you a lightning energy if you flip heads. Blanche gets you a water energy if you flip heads. And Candela gets you a fire energy if you flip heads. These all feel like very, welder at home vibes to me, right?
Yeah, very much so. Coco Prism at home, Welder at home, uh, Melanie at home. Yeah, we literally have Melanie. Who would play Blanche?
Well, but
Yeah, so
Blanche
yeah.
can attach to your non-V Pokemon, right? So
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, it's broken. You're right. Yeah, so obviously the cards don't seem very good at all, but
no.
they could do some cheesy stuff. I'm sure there's something cheesy you could do with them. I'm sure LDF is already cooking up like a deck for each of them for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think like these are great spots in like fun decks of those
yeah,
specific types because it gives you theoretically card draw and energy acceleration. But
yeah,
I mean, I think that these cards would have been solid if it was a guaranteed effect.
yeah.
And I don't think it would have been broken by any means. I think it would have been just like these would have all 3 been solid cards. But the fact that they made the energy attachment clause be a coin flip has pretty much made them low tier to almost just straight up bad.
Yeah, I feel like that's what they kind of do with a lot of cards is when it's like they could be too good, they just add a coin flip. It's like, all right, it's bad now. Speaking of flipping coins, I actually read the APOM for the first time, and I thought it was funny. It's got the Primate Dexterity as an ability. If it would ever take damage from an attack, you flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. So some Whimsicott GX vibes coming in there, and then the Full Tilt Fling for one colorless, flip a coin for each energy attachment. You do 60 times. So there's definitely a good meme deck in
Let's
this
go.
Ambipom. I'm actually this one of those decks where one of those cards where I read it, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of excited to actually try this out at some point.
Yeah, this is
Um,
literally like Whimsicott Jr. It's like the
yeah.
same, the same. It's Whimsicott at home, right? No, but
um,
this is cool though because it's a one prizer, so
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot
One
more you
price,
can do with it.
90 HP,
90
level ball for it.
HP, level ballable. Being a one prizer, it doesn't have a rule box, so you can get energies on it with Cherim, right? You got double turbo
Ambipom,
energy. I don't know.
Flame
And these
Energy.
abilities are always annoying. And it feels like when this type of ability has been printed in the past, like it always, it comes up in a little bit of like a tier 3 meme deck every now and then. I think back to like the Noivern, I think it was from Furious Fists. Like people played that card a little bit.
Yeah.
Whimsicott GX was really kind of the big one for more recent memory that was like an okay deck. I remember the first time I saw Whimsicott, I thought it was absolutely broken. I thought it was like insanely good. I think you thought it was really good too, right? Whenever it first got revealed, and it wasn't quite it.
Yeah, I don't quite remember. It's also one of those whenever you go up against something like the Whimsicott, where when you go up against this, you're like, it could happen. They could hit all heads. Like no matter what, they have a win condition, right?
It
There's
is
a win condition.
terrifying to play versus for sure.
Definitely. One
Um,
card that's probably a little bit more uh serious and has potential, and that we kind of already have, is a new Snorlax with block. So is the one in expanded its ability still called block?
It is, yeah. So it's an exact reprint of the ability, but the other stats on the card are different. So
Yeah.
this
So
Snorlax
same.
has 150 HP. The one in expanded has 130. This one's not a Team Plasma Pokemon. The one in expanded is. Its attack is different as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
block. This is a very annoying ability in the right deck, and I'm sure any control or stall player rejoiced when they saw this card was being reprinted in standard.
Yeah, Sander got super excited, I'm sure. I mean, can you imagine, like, you can just go block, boss up a Genesect, they switch, you boss up a Genesect, they switch, you boss it up again, and then they're stuck. Or, like, one turn later, one more boss later, they're stuck, right? But yeah, block, as long as the Pokemon is in the active, the Snorlax, your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. So, yeah, you can get your opponent some sticky situations with that one. People currently use it in Expanded. Of course, everything can be used in Expanded to a ridiculous level. So, but this one has a little bit more HP. So now you have a tankier Snorlax that you have to deal with in Expanded instead of the Team Plasma one.
Another card I want to talk about that I think seems pretty cool and definitely could be a lot of fun is the Magikarp from this set. Usually Magikarps, you just kind of glance over them and don't think much more of them. It's usually got like a flail or a splash, something like that. Does 10 damage or 0. But yeah, this card, it has 30 hit points and its attack is Raging Fin. For 2 colorless, it deals 10 base damage, and then this attack does 30 more damage for each Magikarp and Gyarados in your discard pile. Which, that's a lot of damage on just a 2 colorless basic Pokemon that can be attacking into you every single turn. Now, it's obviously quite a bit of work to get 7 specific Pokemon into the discard pile, and then also recovering 1 Magikarp every single turn. But I don't know. This card seems pretty cool to me. I don't think it'll be great, but it'll definitely be fun to mess around with.
Yeah, you got Pokestop too. You might be able to triple through. You just gotta be careful of your DTEs and your twin energy. But
Twins, yeah.
yeah, could definitely set it up to get 2-hit KOs pretty consistently, I think. So yeah, it could be a good meme for sure. I don't think it's going very far in top level competitive tournaments, but a good meme alongside the APOM. They can duke it out on the PTCGO ladder.
Yes, let's go. Gyarados, I don't think has really much going on as far as competitive play viability goes. Pretty sweet looking artwork though. I do like a lot of the artwork for the Pokemon Go set because it's like Pokemon in the real world is what all the artwork feels like. So I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of a lot of these. And I guess the other card to talk about, the other big one to mention would be the Lure Module. Don't think this card is great. Each player reveals the top 3 cards of their deck and puts all Pokemon they find there into their hand, and then each player shuffles the other cards back into their deck. So 3 cards is just really not that deep into the deck, and it's not really deep
Yeah.
enough to warrant playing this at a reasonable quantity in your deck, and then also at the same time you're helping your opponent out as well.
Yeah, you can maybe do some weird thing with like a weird Rapid Strike Malmar build where like you can like consistently get it to like find 2 to 3 Pokemon, like you thin out your deck more aggressively somehow or something. But yeah, overall,
Yeah, even in that deck
I
though,
don't
like
see how
so
it'll
many of
work.
your Rapid Strike cards are like brawlies and stuff like that
Yeah,
you're going to be
yeah,
putting back every
exactly.
turn. So, and
That
then
does not look seem great.
yeah, yeah. So I do think it's cool though. Like they're keeping with the theme of what lure module does in Pokemon Go, right? Because what this
Yeah.
does is you put it in a Pokestop and it helps everyone else around you find better Pokemon. So you're helping your opponent find Pokemon. I think that's cool. Keeping with the theming. So. And then I guess the last card we'll mention is a promo card, actually, which is a new Radiant Pokemon, the Radiant Eevee, with its Twinkle Gathering attack. For a colorless, you search your deck for a number of cards up to the number of different types of Pokemon you have in play and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So this is a pretty cool attack. I think that if this was like an ability that ended your turn, or it was like an attack you could use for free, this card would be like pretty okay. But I think like the fact that it costs a colorless and it is an attack that you like have to commit an energy to this EV, it makes it not that good.
I think Sander will probably like this card a lot.
Yeah, I saw Grant also tweeting about this card in expanded with like the Exodia like missing clover
Yeah.
deck, right? And like you can definitely I mean this card seems insane in a deck like that, right? Where you're just like trying to stack your hands to build to this one turn of these missing clover shenanigans and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So probably some as you mentioned, everything is broken and expanded, right? Or everything is good
Yeah,
and
everything
expanded. So
pretty
uh
much.
Radiant Eevee maybe it will have its place there, and I get it could see decent play in like a control deck and standard potentially as
Yeah.
well.
Me as well. You're gonna either Snorlax for a couple, or just leave it in the active and do nothing, or you could attach a capture and Twinkle Gathering for even just like 2 or 3 cards. You got like 2 different types or 3 different types of Pokemon in play.
Yeah.
That's a combo on the next turn, right? So may as well do something with your cards.
Yep. And just a reminder as well for the Radiant Pokemon rule, you can't have more than one Radiant Pokemon in your deck. So really the same as that Gold Star rule from way back
Yeah.
during the EX era. If you played way back then. Yeah, you can only have one in your deck. So you got to choose your Radiant Pokemon carefully, and there's a lot of powerful ones out there. So in order to choose Eevee over something like the Greninja or even like Halucha potentially, it's got to be for good reason. So, and
All
I think
right.
that that is gonna wrap up the Pokemon Go cards. Lots of cool ones. Nothing I think that's gonna be super meta defining by any
Yeah.
means. No Zoroark GXs or Victini Prism Stars, but some cool cards that I'm sure Azul and I will get some good content out of,
For
without a
sure.
doubt.
Definitely. And now we move on to once again everyone's favorite segment of the podcast, which is guess that flavor text. This time I am giving, or this week I'm giving Chip a card. And starting next week, we're gonna even it up here on the guesses, and then starting next week, we're gonna be introducing some lifelines, which is gonna be we'll be able to choose one of these lifelines after we have heard the flavor text, which would be what set the card is from, what stage the card is, or read an attack name from the card to help guess the card. But this time around, we're doing it the good old fashioned way where I read the text and Chip has to guess without any help. So we'll see if Chip can even up the score finally this week.
Let's go.
Are you ready,
Azul
Chip?
is up 1-0 right now. So I've had a lot of failed attempts, so I'm hoping to redeem myself here.
All right. Said to be the embodiment of north winds, it can instantly purify filthy, murky water.
Said to be the embodiment of north winds, it
Yep.
can instantly purify what?
Filthy, murky.
Filthy,
Filthy
murky water.
water.
I mean, it's between a water type and a flying type, right? For me, water type being able to purify the water, a flying type, having to do with the wind. Before we started, you said that this was going to be one you thought I would be able to get. and so that makes me think it's probably like a more obvious Pokemon, or like a more popular Pokemon, like something I should be thinking of. Um, like purifying the water. It just that's very odd because it doesn't feel like those are two things that work together on any Pokemon. Is something that purifies water and flies through the wind. Um, I mean, water flying types, I think the only ones are like Wingull and Pelipper, and it's definitely not that. I guess there's like Swanna, I think, is a water flying type as well. Or Ducklet. I don't think Ducklet's really purifying any water. Getting no reads from Azul here.
I'm looking
Man,
at
I
Malmar
really
list.
just don't know. I purifies the water. I mean, this also sounds like the actions of like a legendary Pokemon, someone who's like helping out the land, helping out the people. So maybe it could be like just a legendary water type floating through the air. I mean, could this be like Suicune or something like that potentially? Um,
Well, I never said floating through the air.
yeah, you did. What's the beginning of
No,
it?
said to be the embodiment of north winds.
The embodiment of north winds. So to me, that just meant floating through the air. I don't know why.
It can instantly purify
Okay,
filthy
the
murky water.
embodiment of north winds. Okay, sure. That is different than floating through the air. I don't know where I got that from. Okay, I'm gonna go with Suicune. We'll
It
see if
is
that's
Suicune,
it. Let's
yes,
go! Let's go! Your
I didn't
boy
think you were gonna
tied
get
up.
it. You're on Swanna and Ducklet for a while. Like, oh, he's not gonna get it.
I was never gonna guess those. I was just kind of
Yeah.
talking out loud. I was talking out loud.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
is Suicune. I thought you were gonna get stuck on that. I thought you were gonna mess it up though, because like yeah, I don't even know how you got the Suicune initially, but then yeah, I corrected you on there's no floating through the air. It's the embodiment of the north winds.
Oh, listen, man, I'm still dealing with the jet lag a little bit. I'm tired right now. It's 3 a.m. my time. We're recording this thing, so I'm amazed I got there too. But here it is. Finally tied it up, and that means next week when we start, we can kind of start fresh. You know, the score right now being 1-1 through 8 episodes. Kind of crazy through 8 episodes. We've only gotten 2 right between the two of us. But yeah, I think having the lifelines will help out a bit and also make things, more interesting because we'll get it right more often, hopefully, and give us a little bit more of a hint as well for those of you playing along at home.
All right, so moving along, we've got the Q&A questions that we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. And once again, if you guys want to get in on any of these Q&A segments, we do tweet out on the Twitter account and then take the replies from the tweet that we tweeted out. So you have to go follow the Twitter at uncommon_energy to know when we tweet it, so you can get your questions in for the future Q&As on the podcast. We don't do it every episode. We do it sometimes. And the first question we have is from topdeck_TCG. Benefits of playtesting with friends that you know their play style and thought sequence, and they know yours, versus playtesting at a local game store with different strangers, so you don't know how they would play/sequence. Chip, I haven't played at a local game store in a long time myself. My in-person testing is minimal outside of actually showing up to a regional. I don't know how much you play IRL still, or have been. What do you think? Is there a big difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's good to do both, right? I think that playtesting with your friends, gives you a couple of experience, right? Because you get to, get really good like grindy games in against someone who knows, not only their play style, but they know like your deck pretty well, right? And they like, have likely played against it before. And if you're playing a bunch of games, like you're gonna get, play based off of their knowledge. But if you play versus, random people, it's going to be a different experience, and that'll probably be more akin to what you would experience at a regional championship. So I haven't tested super try hard for a tournament in a while. But like for the very first Full Grip Games 1K, Grant and I tested quite a bit for mostly for GLC. We tested a little bit for standard, but we mostly tested the GLC control deck. And we tested it pretty hard for the first Full Grip 1K, which was back in like September. Um, and yeah, Grant would come over and yeah, we'd hang out and just grind a bunch of games. And I think there's benefits to that because obviously Grant is a top level player. I always think that if you can play against someone who is better than you, that's only going to help you grow. And so yeah, Grant and I would, get in a lot of really good games and would learn a lot about how to, because we like when you're playtesting like that, you're like talking through different actions and figuring
Yep.
what is the right play in this scenario because you're trying to do it together as opposed to just like playing against someone. But then also, who you're playtesting against is likely going to have perfect knowledge of your deck and things like that, which is not how it's going to be in a real tournament. So I think it's good to have a balance of both things for sure.
Okay, so my I'll do like a little mini rant on this instead of a full rant. So as far as like play style and thought sequence or the way you sequence cards as in terms of aggressive or defensive plays doesn't truly exist in a game like Pokemon. There's only ever like one optimal line of play in the situation with the information you have. So you can always work on that and getting better at perfecting, coming up with game plans and coming up with ways to sequence out your hand to try and play optimally on a turn, irrelevant of who you play up against. And that's like the main driving factor for becoming a better player, irrelevant of deck choice or matchup or anything like that. There's an optimal way to play out every situation. You just want to figure out the optimal way. That's what you're trying to discover. It's not about creating the optimal way. It exists. It's all about kind of finding it more so than creating it. And then as far as like testing groups go, I think the best way to kind of prepare, especially for something like a larger tournament, is to get a group of players who are all on the same page, maybe like 4 to 8 players, whatever. I'm sure you don't want like 30 people involved. That's kind of a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
And then all, be playtesting with the idea of trying to all play the same deck at the tournament and have like a focused testing group where you're all trying to play a deck at a tournament. Maybe you initially want to come up with the deck that you guys all want to be working on, but if you got player A and player B and player C all playing different Arceus builds, and then one person's playing Urshifu, one person's playing Mew. No one's there's it's a bunch of brain power being split up on a bunch of different decks, working on a bunch of different lists, and then you're gonna end up with a bunch of more mediocre products than if you had all just a bunch of mediocre products and mediocre thoughts on how to play matchups and how to even play their own decks instead of if you all just worked on, let's say, Mew VMAX and you all came up with a Mew VMAX list you all like and you all tested all the matchups and figured out all the cute ways to play matchups and tech cards you want to include for the meta, then you'll end up with a way better product and you'll all go into the event way more prepared and have better results overall. So that's the ideal situation for any kind of testing group. And we see that pretty consistently throughout the current age of Pokemon. Sometimes you'll see stuff like, Pedro and Tord who play together. Pedro played Eldegoss, Tord played Manaphy, little things like that, right? There'll be differences in their lists, but they both showed up with the same deck and they both have been working on probably the deck together for a while now. So, and you see they both had pretty good success. Same thing with like Isaiah and Justin.
Yeah, definitely. That all makes sense and is good points, and obviously that has worked very well because Azul was a part of a group who did literally that for like and just absolutely dominated the entire 2019 season. So yeah, the proof is there that it does work. This was a question that I think a lot of people were really interested to hear the answer for because it was the most liked question left on the tweet, and it comes from Mello_Magikarp on Twitter asking, "Do you metagame differently for a 1,200 person regional than a 5 to 600 person one?" And that's something we haven't even actually talked about yet. Is that this Indie Regionals is gearing up to possibly be the largest Pokemon tournament ever. The largest one previous to this was 1,067, I think was the number, which was Collinsville Regionals a couple of years ago in 2019. And this tournament already has over 1,200 players registered for TCG in all 3 divisions. So we don't know exactly what the split is, but I would guess that there's probably over 1,067 registered players as of right now for TCG, and registration actually is still open for this tournament. It was capped originally, but they made a bunch more space, which we didn't talk about yet, but major props to them for making that happen. That's definitely something we should have addressed at the beginning of this episode because we've talked a lot about registration and capacity issues over the last few episodes, and Pokemon and I think round 3 events is who's running this tournament.
Yeah.
They've made it work. They've made more space, and there is still registration available for this tournament. So massive props to them for making this happen.
Yeah, so if you didn't register because you thought it was capped or whatever, go register. You can still register, especially if you're someone locally or a couple states
Absolutely.
over. Still definitely time to do it. Those of you who didn't know and have to maybe buy a plane ticket, maybe out of luck this time around. But yeah, it's open, so go register. But I actually got to ask this question on my stream the other day, and I think initially I said yes, and the more I think about it, I think no, because it's really just like the same meta, just more people, so it doesn't change the variance of anything. The more I think about it, though, is you're going to have more good players show up to an event like this, which means the chance for there to be more weird decks doing well is higher, right? Because you'll have, instead of, I mean, you could have one of the best players in the world show up with Ice Rider, and then if Ice Rider makes top 8, I wouldn't be as surprised, right? I don't think Ice Rider is a great deck or a great play, but if a great player shows up with Ice Rider in top 8s, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, how did they do that, right?
Right.
It'd be like, oh, this player's really good. They chose to play Ice Rider. Okay, the deck still is bad, but the player's good. So I think that is one of the things that happens is you're gonna have such a higher concentration of good players that I think the decks that do well have a wider range of what could do well. And I think you see the same things at international championships. They're not as big of tournaments, but the concentration of good players at ICs is so high
Right.
that it's no surprise when you see 5 Urshifus in the top 8 because they were all piloted by great players, right? So I think that's what you can see. But overall, the general meta, I don't think it really changes. Like the percentages are going to be the same. It's just going to be instead of 600 people and 30% of them are going to be Mew, it's going to be 1,200 people and 30% of them are going to be Mew.
Yeah, I think I agree for sure. Like the meta is the meta, and it's just a larger sample size versus a smaller sample size. So if you have a deck that you feel like does really well against the expected meta, I don't think you should change your play between the two different tournaments. Maybe like mentally you have to prepare a little bit differently, and like you think about things like I think at a 1,200 person tournament, IDing in round 9 at a record of 611 is just not a great idea because you're making it way less likely that you're going to make top 8 if your goal is to make top 8, that
Yeah.
is. Which I guess leads into our next question from at Pierce Adler on Twitter, who asks, what's the best deck for someone who needs a finish to get a Worlds invite and has not played a single game of the format? So there's definitely a few people that find themselves in this spot where they are just a few points away from getting a Worlds invite, but they haven't really played since the 2020 season.
I think the answer is actually pretty easy. I think it's Whimsicott. I think Whimsicott is just the answer for that. Like the deck's straightforward. You get a couple crushing hammerheads. You can cheese anyone with the deck. Some Paths of the Peaks against Mews. Mew, I think, would have been my previous answer, but I think Whimsicott feels that void better.
Yeah.
Because Mew, I think, even though it's the hardest deck to play in the format, I actually still think now that I played Urshifu, I think Mew is harder to play than Urshifu still. It's probably close, but because of how powerful the deck is, you can kind of overcome your misplays with how just powerful the deck is. But I think Whimsicott's so solid right now. I feel like Whimsicott has to be the answer because it's solid, it's straightforward,
Yeah.
and you've got so much cheese potential. I feel like it's one of the biggest things. The only thing you have to really learn with the deck is just when you should use your V Star power, and that's like the biggest thing. But sometimes you just have to look at the board state and think about how the prize trade breaks down, and be like, okay, I should V Star power this turn because otherwise, I actually just will probably start to lose the prize trade from there.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of a weird question because I think normally in the past when people would ask me this question of like, what's the best deck to play for someone who doesn't play a lot but wants to get a Worlds invite, it would be like, well, if you want a Worlds invite, you should play more. You should play the format. You should know the game. If you want to go to play at the biggest competition of the world of the whole year, you should be in the game and be knowing what happens. It's a little different now, though, because, Adler, for example, the person who asked this question, is someone who's playing a good bit in the 2020 season, but then when, everything happened, tournaments got canceled for the next 2 years, it's understandable that someone, didn't play the game as much. So I think this is a little bit more unique of a situation to that. I would still encourage people to play the format a good bit and try to come to a decision based on what they find in their testing, just like you would have prepared previously. I know that's obviously hard to do because it's like 2 years worth of the game that you're kind of missing out on. But I think if your goal is to play in Worlds, and you're just kind of trying to get back into the swing of things, you need to play games now so that you can be ready for Worlds. Because
Yeah.
if you say you just play a straightforward deck like Whimsicott, which I think is a good answer to this question as well, by the way. Like, it's straightforward and solid. So if you just play a deck like Whimsicott for this tournament, get your World's Invite. If you're someone who's like, 50 points away or something like that, play the deck for this tournament, get your World's Invite, and then you don't touch the game again until Worlds, you're probably not going to do very good at Worlds because you haven't been practicing and testing. So if you put in some time now and try to figure out, okay, I like this deck, I like the way it plays, you're going to be in a lot better position in, 4 months whenever Worlds time rolls around.
Yep, you heard it here first, Adler. You will go 0-3 drop at Worlds if you don't start playing more Pokemon. So if you're not going to commit to playing more Pokemon, play the Whimsicott, get your invite. But then, a month out from Worlds, you better start grinding, or Chip's going to come after you. Our next question comes from Ryan _ Usyk. I got that right. What does the deck selection process look like leading up to events like this? Any sleeper rogue picks that you think could do well? I don't have any sleeper rogue picks personally, but Chip, how do you usually pick a deck for a regional back when you used to play in regionals instead of cast them?
Yeah, I love getting to cast these regionals, but it always does make me miss the competition. I do miss it quite a bit, being able to play at events and really test hard and try to figure out a deck that is good for the event. And so yeah, usually what I would do whenever I was really testing hard, and I would imagine this is similar for your process as well, is just theory and play a lot of games against what the expected best decks are with different ideas, and try to learn what different unique things out there have good matchups against the top decks, what different strategies can do well against them, and I usually try to find a deck that isn't a top level deck that can do well. So example recently would have been that Arceus Dark deck, not a deck that I think was a top deck on most people's radars. It was definitely a deck that existed, but I had worked on it a bit and thought it was solid, and I felt like it had decent matchups against a lot of stuff. So decks like that are usually what I kind of lean towards picking. But sometimes the best play for an event is just a good version, like the best list of a top tier deck. So, for this event, to me, it feels like Mew VMAX would be a pretty good play. So if I was playing in this event, I would be testing a lot of Mew VMAX against the Urshifu deck specifically, and trying to see if I can get a really solid win percentage against that deck with, stuff like the One Marnie or the Ice Cube. I would test all of these things and see how they work out, and usually it just comes from playing games, testing a bunch, and kind of going from there. I don't know. What do you think, Azul?
Yeah, pretty similar. Try and come up with that counter deck, that can beat the top two, and then squeak out wins against the rest of the meta based on your opponent not knowing what you're doing, or the deck just being solid enough to do that, or just play a good list for a good deck. That's kind of always how I've thought about it as well. Just play a good list for a good deck, and then just whatever happens, and try and at least be reasonably comfortable with the deck that you do end up choosing.
So our next question, there's kind of two questions that are pretty similar. One from Alex Wilson TCG, who asks, should one expect to hit 2 to 3 Whimsicott in day one? And then at Birch Harrison, who asks, what would be your best guess at the meta share of Arc-Intel, Mew, Urshi, and Whims? How many of each might you hit in 9 rounds? And it's always so hard to predict stuff like this, especially in a format like this where there's a pretty decent amount of different decks out there. I remember back at Collinsville Regionals a few years ago, in day one, 9 rounds, I played against 9 different decks in day one. Now, this was an expanded tournament. That's way more likely to happen in expanded because there's a lot more decks out there. And then in day 2, I played 5 rounds and played against 3 different decks. So in a 14 round tournament, I played against 12 different decks, which is a lot. So that is really what can happen at events like this. I don't think you ever expect to hit 3 copies of the same deck in one day. It'll happen sometimes. Yeah, you'll hit the best deck in the room 3 times in one day sometimes, but there's really just such a wide level of variance when it comes to what your matchups are going to look like in a given day.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't worry about hitting 3 Whimsicott in day 1. Maybe one, like, 1, you could maybe predict
Yeah,
to
I
hit
agree
1
with
Whimsicott.
that.
It does seem to be trending that way, and, I mean, we hyped it up a little bit on this as well. Maybe that'll sway some people's minds as well. So yeah, Whimsicott, maybe 1, in day 1, and then maybe 2. If it does really well, you could even hit up to 3 into day 2, because day 2 will also be 6 rounds, so there's gonna be an extra
Yep,
round
yep.
on the end of that as well. So Whimsicott, I would say 1 in day 1, which is what you should probably expect, but 2 to 3, definitely not. It's gonna be a solid deck, and, I think a lot of people are considering it now, and there seems to be a lot of hype behind it right now. But then, as far as, like, the other meta share of Arc Intel, Mew, Urshi, Wims, I mean, I think Mew will be the most popular deck, and then Arc Intel, I think Arc Intel, Moltres, there's so many different ways to play that deck, though. Will be the most popular Arceus deck, followed by Arceus Straight Water Inteleon, and then it'll be like all the other Arceus Inteleon different things under there. It's just so hard to like categorize Arceus in
Yeah.
general. Unless you're saying just Arceus Inteleon, that might be more popular than Mew, to be honest. Overall, I could see that. And then Urshi Wims will be decks that exist, but maybe hit 1 to none of those in 9 rounds, very reasonably.
And the last question we're taking for the episode today comes from at PP Circuit on Twitter, who asks, what decks are going to face in the finals, in your opinion? And then, is Manaphy going to be a must-play tech in some decks? So we talked about Manaphy specifically in Arceus, and then a little bit in like Rapid Strike Malamar. Is
Yeah.
Manaphy a card that like most decks should consider playing? With Urshifu just having been so dominant at EUIC. And I liked this question a lot. The what decks are going to face in the finals, in your opinion? What are your thoughts, Azul, on those two things?
I think Manaphy, no, like you're not gonna play it in Whimsicott, you're not gonna play it in Mew. I think it goes in most Arceus builds. If Dunsparce isn't better and you only want to play one of the 2 techs, so that's something that has to be tested out. I don't have like an opinion on that too much yet, to be honest. They're both good against Urshifu, which is better. I don't know. Hoopa V is also like almost a must include. I feel like in most Arceus decks, if you're running dark stuff, like you're already including that. So which one of those combos better with the Hoopa V is almost the question. And then in the finals, I think there'll be an Urshifu. I think Urshifu is a pretty safe guess to predict one of those being in the finals, because a lot of great players are probably going to bring that. And then the other pick, I mean, Mew VMAX feels like it's a little bit overdue, but if none of the good players are going to pick it up, it's going to be a kind of a struggle for it to get there. So I want to say that Mew is due in the finals, but it feels like it's going to have a tough road to get there when none of the better players in the game are actually choosing to play it. So Urshifu for sure, but I'm not sure about what else. What do you think?
I think that we could see a situation where this is the time that a lot of good players pick up Mew, where they feel like now is the chance for it to make a deep run. And now is the time where it's like, I feel like this tournament is where it's been, I feel like this is the best position it's been in the meta since for this entire format, since
Yeah.
Brisbane Regionals pretty much. And obviously it ended up winning that tournament. So my bold prediction for the event: Mew mirror match in the finals. Let's see it. It's gonna happen. Here we go.
They got to deal with Whimsicott now, though, which isn't a
Yeah, but
terrible
I think
matchup.
and
But
something we didn't talk about, which I think we should have mentioned when we were talking about Mew earlier, is I think you should definitely playing at least
oh
one
yeah,
basic psychic energy in Mew right now, and
I agree.
probably training court as well. Probably one training court.
Hmm.
Um in order to like recycle that one piece. And I think if you have those 2 cards, your Whimsicott matchup is really not that bad because you just one shot it. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so if you have the basic psychic energy and then like a couple of fog crystals to find it, and then also training court to get it back potentially if it gets hammered, I think that your Whimsicott matchup is just fine.
Yeah, then at that point, Path becomes your biggest enemy. But for a long time, that's not even been that big of a struggle for Mew. It fits pretty well into being. It already deals with that pretty well, and will continue to be okay against it, I think, for sure. And last thing, our top 3 picks for the event. I'll go first, Chip. I would definitely be the Arceus B Barrel deck. That's just definitely probably my favorite deck to still play, especially as far as Arceus decks go. And then, of course, Mew. Probably my front runner right now for a pick for the event. And then the Urshifu deck I like a lot. I haven't played as much with it as I would like to have to pick it to go into the event, but I like it a lot. And it feels like every time I play it, even though I feel like I don't have the most experience with it, and there's like a lot to think about with the deck, you just always have an out for like every situation. There's a route to take to give yourself a chance to win. So Chip, if you were playing instead of casting,
Yeah, I
What
think
would you
my
pick?
number one right now is definitely Mew. I think Mew is very good. I think this is Mew's best opportunity that it's had in a long time to make a deep run. I think like we're at an all-time low of the Arceus decks playing the heavy path, heavy Marnie and stuff like that. Not really seeing any judges and stuff like that out there right now. So as long as you feel good and confident in your Whimsicott matchup and the Urshifu matchup, which obviously isn't really an Urshifu matchup. It's like a Galarian Moltres matchup. So as long as you feel confident in those two things, I think Mew is a great play this weekend. Definitely would probably be my top choice if I was playing. I have not been playing that much because I've been traveling the last week and a half or so. So I haven't really gotten too many games in yet for this specific meta. But yeah, Mew is definitely front runner for me. And number two, I think would probably be Arceus, but not the Bidoof Dark deck. Probably Arceus Beedrill Flygon. After, hearing kind of your thoughts with the Flygon being good against Urshifu, I really like that. I have really always enjoyed Beedrill. I think the deck has some consistency issues. It doesn't really play Bibarel or Inteleon, which are the two best support partners usually to pair with Arceus. You're relying on Luminion, which is a big liability. You've got Oranguru, which is less powerful than the other stuff, but still okay. So I'm a fan of that deck, and after watching it do decently in EUIC, I think that it could do well as well, and it's a lot of fun, so I think that would be another good deck to choose. And number three for me would probably be Whimsicott. I think Whimsicott is solid, but the thing that would stray me away from it is the fact that it is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot you can do as far as like making plays with the deck. You're kind of just playing what you draw into. Whereas something like Urshifu, is very skill based in, your decision making, and there's a lot of room for you to make plays and stuff where there's just not that much room in something like Whimsicott that's just reliant on what you're drawing.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, the Whimsicott's still pretty solid as well, I think. But yeah, not as much skill expression from that one. And you're gonna see stuff like the water energy and the Urshifu decks and the Muse
Yep.
playing the basic psychic.
Yep.
And those are like little easy techs to
Yep.
increase their odds in the matchup, but I don't think that like pushes Whimsicott out of the meta. It's just it's gonna be a little bit tougher for Whimsicott, less of a surprise factor this time around. And with those picks, that's gonna do it for our I don't know what number we're on.
8.
Eighth episode of Uncommon Energy. We'll be back as always every Tuesday at 7 a.m. Eastern. So thanks you all for watching. And if you're watching on YouTube, comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you thought. How are you guys preparing and getting ready for the upcoming regionals? Of course, yeah, follow us on Twitter as well. Like I said, if you guys want to get on these Q&As, uncommon_energy over on the Twitter. Appreciate it as always. Appreciate the continued support. Chip.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate everyone watching. Thanks for the love. You can catch us every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for the love and support. This is our longest episode by far. So if you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like on the YouTube video or leave us a rating over on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to us on. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys in Indy. Good luck to everyone playing in Indianapolis, Joinville, or Bilbao this weekend. And that's going to do it for us. We'll get out of here. Peace.